tune etchmet evian gnd hebwe ane sad mi shidim bishing osmit sides nn tbs 66 final visauritaim feel the gnawing dread. Hear the chitinous scuttling. Smell the alien musk. This is not just a battle, it's an extinction event unfolding, and you're caught in its maw. My name is Overseer Kaelen Vross, and I am recording what may be the last human words spoken on Mortis Secundus. The sky is bleeding. The ground beneath my feet pulses with alien life, and I can feel something vast and hungry pressing against my thoughts, trying to unmake me from the inside out. If you're hearing this transmission, then by some miracle it escaped the shadow in the warp that has swallowed our world. Listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you isn't a warning you can heed. It's already too late for warnings. This is a confession. This is a testament. This is what it looks like when 40 billion human souls are consumed by something that doesn't even recognize them as alive. We were an agri-world, peaceful, productive, 40 billion people growing grain across 6 continents, feeding 3 hive worlds and the Astra Militarum regiments of our subsector. We weren't soldiers. We weren't prepared. We believed the Imperium's vastness would protect us, that the horrors consuming the Eastern Fringe were someone else's nightmare. We were wrong. The shadow reached us 11 months ago, and it has been feeding ever since. Tutti fanfios ma isasio fa agemamant oanas th smilon cease. The first sign was silence. Our astropaths stopped receiving messages from Caldris Prime, the neighboring system. 3 weeks of nothing. Governor Velas finally sent a reconnaissance ship, the Harvest Crown. I was in the command center when Captain Dorian's report came through, and I will carry the sound of his voice to whatever death awaits me. It wasn't fear I heard. It was incomprehension. The voice of a man whose reality had shattered. Caldris Prime is gone, he said, and the way he said, gone made my skin crawl. Not destroyed. Not conquered. S1. The orbital stations were still there, but covered in something organic, pulsing. The planet's surface was unrecognizable beneath a carpet of biomass that writhed like it was breathing. No human life signs. No Imperial transmissions. Only heat signatures. Billions of them, moving in patterns that suggested intelligence and coordination. He said the ship had been pursued by vessels that looked grown rather than built. He said his navigator refused to enter the warp again without sedation because she could feel something vast and hungry, watching them from the immaterium. We declared a state of emergency. The Planetary Defense Force mobilized. We sent astropathic distress calls to every nearby Imperial outpost. And then we waited. Governor Velas told us reinforcements were coming. The Astra Militarum would arrive within weeks. We just needed to hold. Maintain order. Keep the food production running. He believed his own words. We wanted to believe them. But I kept hearing Captain Dorian's voice describing a world that had been erased, transformed into something that served purposes we couldn't begin to understand. 3 weeks later, our scouts detected anomalies in the outer system, massive organic structures moving through the void, defying standard physics. Our orbital defense platforms prepared to engage. Before they could fire, the sky began to rain. Thousands of seed pods descended across all 6 continents, spreading in patterns that spoke of deliberate coordination. The PDF units closest to the landing sites moved to investigate. None reported back. By the time aerial reconnaissance reached the impact zones, the transformation had already begun, and that's when we saw them for the first time. The termagants came first. Imagine a human skeleton stretched and warped, given armor made of chitin, reversed joints, weapons that were part of their biology rather than tools they carried. They moved in swarms. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Driven by something that transcended individual survival. Our soldiers shot them down by the hundreds. More kept coming. And here's what broke us early. The bodies didn't stay dead. Smaller creatures, things we'd later call rippers, dragged the corpses back to the landing sites where they were consumed and recycled. Nothing was wasted. Every death fed the invasion. Behind the termagants came worse things. Hormagaunts that moved like predators, faster than our vehicles, scythe, limbs extended. hunting in packs that showed tactical awareness, warriors that coordinated the swarms with gestures and signals our scientists detected but couldn't interpret. And then the truly massive specimens, carnifexes that stood taller than our buildings and absorbed lasgun fire that should have killed them a dozen times over, healing in real time as they fed on the defenders they killed. I watched one assault a fortified settlement on the southern continent. Watched it tear through reinforced ferrocrete like parchment. Watched it grow stronger with every life it took. That was when I understood. This wasn't an army we were fighting. This was a biological system that treated war as evolution in real time, where our deaths were just data points for optimization. Within days, structures began appearing near the impact sites. Towers of organic matter that pulsed with bioluminescence and emitted a low-frequency hum you could feel in your bones. The tech priests identified them as capillary towers, digestive organs that processed biomass and transmitted it through underground networks to massive pools where it was broken down and reconstituted. The soil itself began to change. The native earth gave way to a substance they called Tyranid Digestion slime, a biological catalyst that accelerated decomposition and made the ground hostile to anything except their organisms. The air quality deteriorated. The towers released spores that made breathing difficult without filtration. Mortis Secundus was being remade at the molecular level, transformed from a world that supported human life into something alien. We weren't being conquered. We were being digested. The PDF fought with everything they had, but they were trained for suppressing riots and defending against pirates, not for warfare against an enemy that adapted to every tactic in real time. We'd develop a defensive position that successfully held against the swarms, and within days new organisms would spawn specifically designed to overcome those defenses. When we used fire, they developed heat-resistant carapaces. When we deployed chemical weapons, they mutated enzymes that neutralized the toxins. When we fortified positions, they developed burrowing organisms or flying creatures with membranous wings that dropped from above. Every adaptation we made was met with a counter-adaptation, and they learned faster than we could innovate. It became clear within the first month that we weren't just outmatched. We were fighting something that treated our tactics as evolutionary pressure and responded with biological solutions we couldn't predict or prevent. I was assigned to coordinate resource distribution from the planetary capital, Valoris Prime, working under Governor Velis as civilian logistics overseer. My job was to ensure food production continued, that supply lines remained open, that the population didn't collapse into anarchy. It was impossible. The farms closest to the landing sites were overrun within days. We received scattered reports that still haunt me. People taken alive, dragged to the digestion pools, dissolved slowly while still conscious. Their screams broadcast across the Vox network. The Tyranids used our own communications against us as psychological warfare. Other reports spoke of organisms that hunted command staff specifically. The soldiers called them lictors, infiltration specialists that could enter settlements undetected and kill with surgical precision. Fear spread faster than the invasion itself. Settlements that hadn't been attacked yet began reporting sightings in the darkness, hearing sounds that shouldn't exist, finding evidence that the creatures were already inside the walls, waiting. And then the psychic presence arrived. Our astropaths started reporting headaches, pressure building inside their skulls. Within days, half had collapsed into catatonic states, muttering in languages that weren't High Gothic or any human tongue. The remainder sensed something vast and cold pressing against reality's veil. The tech. Priests theorized we were experiencing the edge of the hive mind's consciousness, the psychic gestalt coordinating the invasion across multiple star systems simultaneously. Whatever it was getting closer. The shadow in the warp doesn't just block psychic communication. It devours it. Our remaining astropaths could no longer send or receive messages beyond planetary orbit. We were isolated, cut off from the Imperium, screaming into a void that absorbed our cries without echo. The psychers among our population began bleeding from their eyes and nose. Several had to be executed when they attacked their companions in fits of madness. But even non-psychers felt it. A pressure behind the eyes, constant low-level anxiety that couldn't be rationalized away. A sense that something was watching from just beyond perception. People reported nightmares of being digested, of dissolving into vast biomass, of losing individual identity and becoming part of something larger and utterly alien. Suicide rates spiked, violence increased. The fabric of civilization was fraying not from physical deprivation but from psychic attrition. I felt it myself. There were moments reviewing supply reports when my thoughts would simply stop, replaced by an awareness of hunger that wasn't my own. I would taste biomass in the back of my throat, feel the urge to consume and grow and multiply. These episodes lasted only seconds, but they terrified me. I wasn't a psyker. I had no warp sensitivity. Yet the hive mind's presence was so overwhelming that even ordinary humans could sense it. We were prey animals smelling the predator, and the knowledge of inevitable consumption was driving us insane. QT fanfi, tirazmi sjoa jamami, the coant amani. Governor Velas refused to acknowledge reality. He insisted reinforcements were coming, that we just needed to hold for a few more weeks. He ordered food production and shipment to continue, even though 3 of 6 continents were completely overrun, and the remaining 3 were under constant assault. He refused to authorize evacuations, claiming that abandoning our posts was heresy, that the Emperor demanded we fulfill our duty regardless of personal cost. The few transport ships in orbit were mobbed by desperate civilians. When riots became too violent, the PDF opened fire on their own people. I watched from the command center as thousands died in the spaceport districts, trampled or shot, their bodies left to rot in the streets because we no longer had resources to dispose of them properly. The Tyranids came that night and harvested the corpses with the same mechanical efficiency they showed for everything else. Around this time, we began noticing changes in the survivors. People exposed to Tyranid spores or wounded by their biological weapons exhibited unusual symptoms. Accelerated healing, but wrong. Scar tissue too dense, with texture resembling chitin more than human skin. Some developed increased strength and reflexes. Others experienced sensory changes. Enhanced hearing, smell, the ability to see in near darkness. The medical facilities were overwhelmed. The official diagnosis was genestealer infection, though these weren't traditional cult infiltrations. This was something caused by exposure to the general Tyranid biosphere. The contaminated were supposed to be quarantined or executed, but there were too many, and many were PDF soldiers or administrators whose skills we desperately needed. We made compromises. We allowed the infected to continue serving as long as they remained functional. We told ourselves it was pragmatic. That survival justified any adaptation. Looking back, I understand we were becoming complicit in our own consumption. I became contaminated myself 6 months into the invasion. A lictor ambushed us during an inspection on the 4th continent. It killed 3 of my guards before I even registered its presence. It struck me with a blade limb, tearing through my coat and slicing across my ribs. I should have died from blood loss. Instead, the wound closed within hours. The scar tissue felt hard and segmented like insect carapace. Over the following weeks, other changes manifested. My eyesight improved, especially in low light. My sense of smell became acute to the point of discomfort. I required less sleep, less food. My body was becoming efficient in ways the medica couldn't explain. I reported none of this. Reporting meant execution. Governor Velas needed me functional. So I hid my contamination and continued working, feeling the changes spread deeper, touching not just my body but my thoughts, my instincts, my sense of self. The worst part wasn't the physical mutations, it was the dreams. Every night I'd close my eyes and find myself dissolving, my consciousness fragmenting and merging with something vast and distributed. a network of minds spanning solar systems, processing information in ways human neurology couldn't replicate. I'd see through 1,000 eyes simultaneously, taste with 1,000 tongues, feel through sensory organs with no human equivalent. I'd experience hunger not as personal need, but as species-wide imperative, the drive to consume and replicate and spread that defined Tyranid existence. And underneath everything, threading through every sensation, was the hive mind itself, a presence so enormous and ancient that individual consciousness seemed absurd, an evolutionary dead, and the galaxy would eventually digest and forget. I'd wake gasping, covered in sweat, uncertain whether I'd experience nightmare or psychic bleed through from the organisms that wounded me. The boundary between self and other was eroding. I wasn't sure how much longer I could maintain the pretense of humanity. By month 8, organized resistance had collapsed. The PDF existed only in isolated pockets holding fortified positions but unable to coordinate or receive resupply. The civilian population fragmented. Some tried maintaining normal routines in settlements still nominally safe. Others descended into barbarism or religious mania. Convinced the invasion was the Emperor's judgment, and only through penitence could they earn salvation. I watched from the capital as entire cities went dark, Vox networks failing, lights extinguishing one by one until only silence remained. We sent scout teams and found the cities intact but empty. Populations vanished. Only evidence of Tyranid infiltration and biomass transport trails leading back to the digestion pools. The creatures weren't killing everyone anymore. They were taking them alive, harvesting systematically, dragging them to pools for processing while their nervous systems still functioned. We intercepted Vox transmissions from the captured, distorted, broken, begging for death as digestive acids dissolved them from extremities inward. The Tyranids broadcast these deliberately, using our communication networks, ensuring everyone who could receive a Vox signal knew exactly what awaited them. Governor Velis broke in month 9. I was present when he received confirmation that the last astropath had died, that no reinforcements were coming, that the Imperium had written off Mortis Secundus and redirected resources to more strategically vital worlds. He sat in his command throne for a long time, saying nothing, hands gripping the armrests until his knuckles went white. Then he stood, drew his sidearm, and shot himself through the head. No note, no final words. He simply concluded death was preferable to what was coming, and he chose to end himself on his own terms. Command fell to me by default. I inherited a world 90% consumed, a population reduced from 40 billion to perhaps 3 million, and a defensive network that existed only in theory. The Tyranids controlled the continents. We held a few fortified enclaves and the capital, which had been spared major assault for reasons we couldn't determine. I gave orders because someone had to. I coordinated what remained of our logistics because the alternative was chaos. But I had no illusions. We weren't fighting for victory. We were fighting for the privilege of dying on our feet rather than being dissolved in digestion pools. In month 10, scout teams detected massive structures in the northern continent's central plateau. BO. Forms so large they registered as geological features. When we obtained visual reconnaissance, we understood why the capital had been spared. The Tyranids were constructing a hive ship, growing it directly from the planet's biomass, using Mortis Secundus itself as raw material. The structure was kilometers long, a vast organic cathedral of chitin and sinew and pulsing bio-circuitry, still gestating but visibly nearing completion. Once finished, it would detach and join the fleet in orbit, carrying the genetic memory and biological resources of everything it consumed. Mortis Secundus would be left as a barren rock, stripped of atmosphere, water, anything organic worth harvesting. We would be extinct. But our extinction would serve the Hive Fleet's expansion, providing resources to assault the next system, and the next, and the next, until the galaxy itself had been consumed. I made my decision then. We couldn't win. We couldn't even delay the inevitable. but we could ensure the Tyranids gained as little as possible from our world. I ordered the PDF to sabotage the digestion pools, contaminate them with industrial toxins and radioactive waste, destroy the capillary towers, disrupt the biomass transport networks. I ordered civilians to burn everything that could be burned, poison water sources, render the planet as hostile to Tyranid adaptation as possible. We wouldn't be harvested passively. We'd make ourselves indigestible, force the Hive Fleet to expend resources it might have used elsewhere. It was petty defiance, ultimately meaningless, but it was all we had left. The final assault came in month 11. The Tyranids deployed organisms we'd never seen before, creatures engineered specifically to overcome our remaining defenses. Things that burrowed through ferrocrete like soil, things that spat acid capable of melting plasteel, things that generated psychic static disrupting our communications and targeting systems. The PDF fought with everything they had. It wasn't enough. Within hours, the outer walls were breached. Within a day, Tyranids were in the city streets, hunting through buildings, dragging screaming civilians toward portable digestion organs grown specifically for urban warfare. I could hear the sounds of consumption from my office, the wet tearing of flesh, the hiss of digestive enzymes, the chittering of rippers swarming over corpses and stripping them to bone in seconds. I knew then I had failed. Not failed to stop the invasion. That was impossible from the start. Failed to preserve anything worth preserving. Failed to ensure our deaths had meaning beyond feeding alien appetite. Failed to maintain my humanity in the face of horror human minds weren't equipped to process. The hive mind's presence pressed against my thoughts with crushing weight, trying to subsume what remained of my individual consciousness. The contamination in my body was spreading, rewriting my biology at accelerating pace, transforming me into something neither human nor Tyranid, but some grotesque hybrid serving the Hive Fleet without conscious volition. I wanted to resist, to die as myself rather than as a component of something alien. But I wasn't sure I still had that choice. The hive mind was inside me now, not as invader but as inevitable conclusion. The final stage of transformation that began the moment the first spores touched our atmosphere. In the end, I made one final choice. I authorized use of our last resort, a cache of forbidden weapons the Mechanicus had buried beneath the capital during colonization. Devices whose existence was technically heretical, but whose deployment seemed appropriate given circumstances. I gave activation codes to the remaining tech priests and told them to arm the warheads. If we couldn't save Mortis Secundus, we could at least deny the Tyranids the biomass they sought. The planet would burn. We would burn with it. But the Hive Fleet would gain nothing from our consumption. It was Pyrrhic victory at best, hollow defiance that would barely register in the Hive Mind's calculations. But it was ours. The warheads detonated 6 hours later, vaporizing the capital and everything within 500 kilometers. I was in the command center when the blast wave hit. Felt the building disintegrate. Felt my contaminated body begin to burn in nuclear fire. In that final moment, something unexpected happened. The hive mind's presence withdrew. Not from fear. It was incapable of such emotions. But because I'd become useless. A resource that could no longer be harvested. I was myself again, briefly, purely human for the first time in months, and in that moment of clarity, I understood the true horror of the Tyranid threat. They don't conquer. They don't occupy. They consume and move on, leaving nothing except barren rocks floating in the void. They're not evil or malicious. They're simply hungry, operating according to biological imperatives that transcend morality or meaning. Fighting them isn't war. It's the universe's most fundamental struggle, the conflict between the living and the force that renders all life into fuel for its own continuation. I don't know how this transmission survived. How my final report reached the Imperium when everything else about Mortis Secundus was erased. Perhaps the warp carries certain information, regardless of the Shadow's interference. Perhaps the Emperor deemed it necessary that someone understand what we experienced. I'm dead now. Certainly, vaporized or consumed or transformed beyond recognition. But my words remain. Let them serve as warning. The Tyranids cannot be reasoned with or appeased. They cannot be permanently defeated, only temporarily delayed. They adapt to every strategy, evolve past every defense, consume every resource in their path. Living under their shadow means accepting you're already dead, that your world is already lost, that every day of continued existence is borrowed time purchased with others' lives. It means watching your humanity erode piece by piece, contaminated by alien biology, oppressed by psychic presence, driven to choices that would have been unthinkable otherwise. It means understanding the universe is fundamentally hostile to human life, that our civilization exists in cracks between vast forces regarding us as nothing more than biomass to be processed. If you receive this transmission, if you're facing the swarms on your own world, know that you cannot win. The Tyranids have consumed 1,000 worlds and will consume 1,000 more. They are the galaxy's future, the inevitable conclusion of biological existence. But you can choose how you die. You can fight. Delay them. Force them to expend resources. Make your consumption as costly as possible. Deny them easy harvest. Poison yourselves if necessary. Burn everything rather than let it feed their expansion. Or you can submit and die quickly. Dissolve in their pools and become part of something that will outlast the Imperium itself. Both choices are valid. Both are equally meaningless in the scope of what's coming. The Hive Fleets are numberless. The Hive Mind is eternal, and we are nothing but protein to be reclaimed. This is Overseer Kaelen Vross. Final transmission from Mortis Secundus. The world is dead. I am dead. Soon you will be dead too. The only question is whether you'll face extinction with eyes open or closed. Whether you'll understand what's consuming you or die in ignorant bliss. I chose to understand. I chose to witness. And now I've told you what I saw in the shadow. What awaits in the darkness between stars. What hungers at the edge of human space. The Emperor protects, they say, but the Emperor is far away, and the Tyranids are here, now, everywhere, eating the galaxy one world at a time. There is no salvation. There is only postponement, and eventually the postponement will end. The shadow will cover everything. There will be nothing left but the sound of consumption, the eternal grinding of biomass into fuel for expansion that will never cease. This is the Xenos threat. This is life under the Tyranid shadow. This is what extinction looks like when it arrives not as catastrophic event, but as slow, methodical process of consumption and transformation. This is the future the Imperium faces. The enemy that will outlast Chaos and Necrons and all other threats, because while those can be fought with weapons and faith and courage, the Tyranids can only be delayed. They are inevitable. They are unstoppable. They are here. And soon, they will be everywhere. Hiti, Sijine ALD Gevede His Eonarti Arkit Tipos OCL EFCAC Amartias Sakion Diendis Funati Itorian Sisa EMP and Alpa Proso Yao Yao.